When my parents tried to take my $4.7 million inheritance, I did not shout. I did not cry. I only felt a strange, quiet ache in my chest. I remember thinking, so this is what disappointment feels like when it comes from the people who raised you? It all began on a warm Tuesday morning. The sun was soft. The house smelled like fresh coffee. Everything looked normal, but inside me, something felt different. I had just returned from a long deployment. I was tired, grateful, and ready for rest. I had served as a JAG officer for many years, but at home, I was still just their daughter. I thought that meant safety. I thought it meant love. I thought it meant honesty. I sat at the kitchen table while my mother placed a cup of tea in front of me. She smiled, but the smile did not reach her eyes. My father sat across from me, arms folded, breathing just a little too slow. I noticed small things, like how they kept glancing at each other, how my mother's hands trembled a bit. "Sweetheart," my father said. His voice was calm, too calm. "We need to talk about your future, about what was left for you." I nodded, waiting. My mother continued, "We think it's best if the estate stays with us. You're always traveling, always busy. You won't have time to manage such a large responsibility." I felt something sink inside me. Not anger, not shock, just sadness. They were my parents. They were supposed to protect what belonged to me. Instead, they were preparing to take it. I took a small sip of tea and asked softly, "Are you saying you want the inheritance transferred to your name?" My mother looked down. My father didn't. "It's for the best," he said. The room went silent. The ceiling fan hummed. The air felt heavy. For a moment, I felt like a child again, small, unsure, wanting to be loved. But another part of me, the part shaped by the military, by law, by all the cases I had handled, whispered, "Stay calm, listen first." I set the cup down. "What exactly have you done?" I asked. My father exhaled slowly. We already filed a petition. We told the court you're unstable after deployment, that you're not fit to handle the assets." My hands went cold. They were willing to paint me as unfit, their own daughter. I looked at them carefully. My mother's eyes glistened, but she did not take it back. My father's jaw was set, determined. That morning, something inside me broke. Not loudly, not violently, but quietly, like a thin thread giving way after holding too much weight for too long. I stood up. "Thank you for telling me," I said softly. My mother whispered, "We're doing this for your own good." But even she didn't sound convinced. As I walked out of that kitchen, the house felt different, smaller, less warm. I stepped outside into the gentle sunlight, and a quiet promise formed inside me. I will handle this, calmly, carefully, and with truth. I just never expected the judge to say the words that would change everything. When I left my parents' house that morning, I walked slower than usual. The air felt heavy, like the sky itself was unsure how to react. I kept thinking about the quiet way they had spoken, the calm tone they used while telling me they wanted to take everything my late mentor had left for me. A $4.7 million inheritance, and somehow they believed they deserved it more than I did. As I reached my car, I sat inside for a long moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. I wasn't angry. Maybe I should have been. But all I could feel was a deep, steady sorrow. These were the two people who raised me, who held my hand when I was small, who packed my lunches, who told me to be strong. And now they had filed a petition claiming I was unstable, unfit, incapable. I whispered to myself,
Why didn't they trust me? The words felt fragile in the quiet of the parked car. My childhood memories came back uninvited. Birthdays, road trips, my father teaching me how to ride a bike, my mother hugging me before I left for basic training. None of those moments seemed false. None of them hinted at greed. But sometimes life changes people slowly, like water shaping stone over many years. When I became a JAG officer, they told everyone they were proud. They framed my graduation photo and placed it above the fireplace. But as time went on, I noticed small shifts. My long deployments, my steady promotions, my financial independence. Each step I took seemed to move me further away from them, even though I never meant for that to happen. Maybe they felt left behind. Maybe they felt entitled. I didn't know, and that uncertainty hurt more than anything else. Back at my own small home, I placed my keys on the table and stood there quietly. The house felt still. No footsteps, no voices, just the soft hum of the refrigerator. I took a deep breath and whispered, one step at a time. I opened the file folder that held every document related to the inheritance. My mentor, Captain Eleanor Pierce, had trusted me completely. She left everything to me because she believed in my future. She believed in my ability to help others. Losing her had been painful enough, but fighting my own parents over her last wish, that felt like another kind of grief. As I reviewed the papers, I realized something important. My parents had underestimated me. They forgot that the daughter they raised became an officer of the law. They forgot that I understood every clause, every process, every right they were trying to take away. Still, I knew this wasn't just a legal battle. It was emotional, personal, quietly heartbreaking. I sat down, folded my hands together, and closed my eyes. I will not fight them with anger, I told myself, but I will fight with truth. A small tear slid down my cheek, but I wiped it gently. This wasn't a war. It was a journey. One I never expected, but one I was ready to face. If you're following this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. The days after I discovered my parents' petition felt strangely quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, more like the silence that follows after you hear something you cannot unhear. I went through my mornings slowly. I brewed my coffee, I opened my blinds, I tried to breathe normally, but every moment felt touched by a soft ache like a bruise that wasn't healing. 3 days later, my mother called. I stared at the screen for a long second before I answered. "Hi, Mom," I said gently. She hesitated. I could hear her swallow. "Honey, your father and I want to talk again. Maybe you can come over. Just dinner, nothing more." Her voice tried to sound warm, but something felt off, like she was trying too hard to be soft, too practiced. Still, I agreed. A part of me hoped they would apologize. Another part of me feared they wouldn't. When I arrived for dinner, the house felt familiar but strangely distant. My mother had cooked all my favorite dishes. The table was neatly set, candles lit, soft music playing in the background. It almost felt like childhood again. Almost. But my father's expression told the truth. His jaw was tight. His eyes didn't soften the way they used to when he was proud of me. We ate in silence for a few minutes. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "We want you to withdraw your objection," he said quietly, not looking at me. I put my fork down gently. "Dad, you filed a petition saying I'm mentally unstable. You understand how serious that is, don't you?" My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't mean it like that. We just thought that I wouldn't fight back," I asked softly. My father's gaze hardened. "You're being dramatic. This is about what's best for the family. You don't need that kind of money. We do." There it was. The real truth. Not wrapped in concern, not softened by love. I took a slow breath. The inheritance is not just money. It's Captain Pierce's trust, her choice, her final wish. My father shook his head. "She wasn't family. She was more family to me than you are right now," I whispered before I could stop myself. Silence fell over the room, heavy, sharp. My mother covered her mouth, tears spilling. My father looked at me like I had struck him, but the truth hung there, too honest to take back. I stood and pushed my chair in. I'm not withdrawing anything, but I am willing to sit down with a mediator. We can talk calmly. My father snapped. We don't need a mediator. We need you to listen. I met his eyes. I am listening, but I'm not giving up what was entrusted to me. My mother reached for my arm, but her hand froze halfway, like she didn't know if she had the right to touch me anymore. I walked to the door, my heart felt heavy but steady. When I stepped outside, the cool evening air met my face, and for the first time I wondered, if this was only the beginning, how much more pain lay ahead?
A week later, the official court papers arrived at my doorstep. They came in a large white envelope, stamped with the county seal. Even though I knew they were coming, my heart still tightened when I picked them up. The weight of the envelope felt heavier than paper should ever feel, like it carried the weight of every painful choice my parents had made. I carried it inside and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I reviewed case files during my deployments, the same table where I had written letters home. Now it was the place where I opened a legal petition filed against me by the two people who once tucked me into bed. I broke the seal slowly, trying to steady my breath. Inside were pages of claims: emotional instability after military service, difficulty managing stress, isolation tendencies, all written as statements of fact, all signed by my parents. I read each line carefully, but my vision blurred more than once. Not from anger, just from the quiet ache that comes when someone writes down your pain and uses it against you. I whispered, "Mom, Dad, why would you do this?" As a JAG officer, I'd seen many families break apart over money, but I never imagined mine would be one of them. I thought I had protected myself by serving the law, but sometimes the law could only protect actions, not hearts. I called my attorney, an old friend from my first deployment. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, I heard. How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," though I wasn't sure I believed my own voice. "The petition is worse than I expected." He sighed gently. "They're trying to build a narrative. Don't take it personally." But how could I not? It was my life, my service, my story. And now it was being twisted into something fragile and broken. He continued, "Send me everything. We'll respond. Calmly, professionally, no aggression." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Staying calm was the only thing keeping me together. That afternoon, I drafted my response, a respectful, measured document stating facts, not emotions. I wrote that I was fully capable, mentally sound, and legally entitled to the inheritance. No accusations, no bitterness, just truth. But when I placed my signature at the bottom, my hand shook. Not because I doubted my case, but because I still couldn't understand why my parents wanted to fight me publicly. As the sun set, golden light filled the room. I closed my eyes and let the warmth rest on my face. For a moment, I imagined Captain Pierce standing beside me, her steady voice saying, "Stand tall, do what is right." I whispered into the silence, "I'm trying." That night, I placed both envelopes, mine and theirs, on the table. Two sides of the same painful story. I didn't know what the judge would say. I didn't know if this battle would heal us or break us forever. But I knew one thing. The next step was coming, and I had to be ready for it. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. The court scheduled a preliminary mediation before the first hearing. It was supposed to be a calm conversation in a quiet room, with a neutral mediator helping us talk things through. I hoped it would ease some of the tension. I hoped my parents would see me as their daughter again, not as someone standing between them and a large sum of money. I arrived early and sat in the small waiting area. The room smelled like fresh paper and faint coffee, soft beige walls, a gentle hum from the air conditioner. Everything seemed designed to make people relax, but nothing inside me felt relaxed. I kept my hands folded, breathing slowly. In, out. In, out. A few minutes later, the door opened. My parents walked in together.
My mother's eyes met mine for a brief second, then drifted away. My father didn't look at me at all. He held a slim folder in his hand, too organized, too prepared. The mediator, a kind woman with silver hair and soft glasses, welcomed us with a gentle smile. She said, "We're here to listen, no judgment, only discussion." We sat at a round table. I remembered thinking that round tables were supposed to make people feel equal, but we didn't feel equal at all. The mediator nodded. "Let's begin with why we're here." My father spoke first. "We believe our daughter isn't capable of managing such a large inheritance responsibly. We're simply trying to protect her." I looked at him carefully. "Dad, I manage legal cases involving millions of dollars. I've been trusted with decisions that affect entire units. Why don't you trust me?" He didn't answer. My mother finally spoke, her voice soft. "It's not about trust. It's about fairness. We worked hard our entire lives, and she suddenly has almost $5 million handed to her? For what? For being around someone?" Her words struck deeper than she intended. Captain Pierce wasn't just someone. She was my mentor, my guide, my second family. She left the inheritance because she believed I would use it responsibly, even generously. "Insure an Aniba," I whispered. "I didn't ask for the money. I only want to honor her last wish." My father leaned forward. "Her wish doesn't matter more than your family." The mediator lifted her hand gently. "Let's slow down." But my father stood up abruptly. "No! She won't listen. She never has." My mother touched his arm. "Please." He pulled away, shaking his head. "We're done here." The mediator tried to intervene, but it was too late. My father walked out. My mother followed him, giving me one last painful look, full of confusion, fear, and something I couldn't quite name. The door closed behind them. The silence that followed was heavy, like a blanket I couldn't lift. The mediator sighed softly. "I'm sorry. Some families come in with pain that's too deep to fix in one sitting." I nodded, though my throat was tight. I hoped. When I left the building, the sky was gray, and a soft drizzle had started to fall. I stood in the rain for a moment, letting the drops cool my face. Maybe it was the weather. Maybe it was exhaustion. But for the first time, I wondered if this court battle would cost me more than I was ready to lose. The morning of the first hearing arrived sooner than I expected. I slept lightly the night before, waking up every hour, my mind replaying the same questions over and over. How did we get here? How did love turn into this? By the time the sun rose, I felt strangely calm, like my heart had simply run out of ways to be afraid. I wore my uniform, not to intimidate anyone, not to show strength, but because it reminded me who I was and who I had worked so hard to become. When I walked into the courthouse, the air felt cool and still. The polished floors reflected the overhead lights, and the faint echo of footsteps filled the hallway. I sat beside my attorney, hands resting on my lap, breathing slowly. A few minutes later, my parents walked in. My mother's eyes looked tired, shadowed with worry. She clutched her handbag tightly, almost like she was holding on to something that was slipping away. My father walked with a stiff confidence, but I saw the tension in his shoulders. They didn't greet me. Not even a nod. The bailiff called the case. We stepped forward. The judge, an older man with gentle eyes but a firm presence, looked through the paperwork. He read silently for a long moment, then removed his glasses and looked at my parents. "You're requesting full control of your daughter's inheritance, and you're claiming she is mentally unfit due to military trauma. Is that correct?" My father straightened. "Yes, Your Honor. We believe we're acting in her best interest." The judge nodded slightly, then turned to me. "Ma'am, do you have a response?" I stood, steady but soft. "Yes, Your Honor. I respect my parents. I always have. But their claims are not true. I am mentally fit. I have served honorably for years. I have no history of instability, and I have documentation to support that. My mother whispered something under her breath, but the judge raised a hand gently. He glanced back at the petition. It says here you have trouble managing stress and finances. He paused. What is your occupation, ma'am? I answered calmly. I'm a JAG officer, U.S. Navy. The courtroom went quiet. The judge leaned back slowly, brows raising. A JAG officer, he repeated, as in Judge Advocate General? Yes, Your Honor. He took a long breath and closed the file. So let me be very clear. A JAG officer manages legal cases, military regulations, and high-stress environments daily. These responsibilities require exceptional mental stability and judgment. He looked directly at my parents. Why was this information left out of your petition? My father's face paled. My mother clasped her hands together, trembling. The judge continued, his tone gentle but firm. This court will need substantial evidence to support claims of incompetence, far more than handwritten statements, emotional assumptions, or personal disagreements. My heart felt tight, like it wasn't sure whether to break or breathe. The judge turned to me again. We will schedule a full hearing. Until then, the inheritance remains in your name. I nodded softly. Thank you, Your Honor. As we stepped out of the courtroom, my mother finally looked at me. Her eyes were filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time: fear and regret. But neither of us spoke. The hallway felt long and quiet as we went our separate ways. And for the first time, I realized this fight wasn't just about money. It was about truth and standing for it, no matter how much it hurt. If you're following this emotional journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel.
After the judge's words in the courtroom, I thought the hardest part was over. I thought the truth would be enough to protect me. But life, as it often does, had another lesson waiting. A week later, my attorney called me with news that made my heart skip a beat. There's been a development, he said quietly. Your parents' attorney just filed additional paperwork, but it looks like they overlooked something very important. I frowned, leaning back in my chair. What do you mean? He paused. Your parents claimed you're incapable of managing your inheritance, but they never checked your legal and professional records properly. They didn't account for your military service or your standing as a JAG officer. When the court reviewed their filing, they noticed the omission, and it could seriously affect their case. I blanked. My chest tightened, but not with fear, with relief and disbelief. Relief that the truth could finally shine through, and disbelief that the people who raised me could make such a basic mistake. That afternoon, I sat down in my quiet living room, holding a cup of tea, thinking about all of it. All the tension, the dinners that had felt like minefields, the mediation that ended before it began, the court papers, the lies, the sorrow, and now this, a small opening, a crack that let hope in. I thought about Captain Pierce. She had trusted me implicitly. She had believed I would handle her estate with care. And now, in a way, her faith was becoming my shield. The next day, the court scheduled a hearing to review the updated filings. I went in early, as usual, and waited in the polished hallway. When my parents arrived, the change in the room was palpable. My father's stride was less confident. My mother's hands trembled more than before. Even without words, I could see that the realization of their mistake was weighing on them. The judge entered and called the case. He glanced through the files again, then looked at my parents with a pointed gaze. It appears your petition did not consider the petitioner's professional qualifications or her mental fitness record. How do you respond to that? My father swallowed hard. My mother shifted uncomfortably. Neither of them had an answer.
I stood, my voice calm but firm. Your Honor, I respect my parents, but the facts are clear. I am fully capable, both legally and mentally, to manage my inheritance. Captain Pierce's trust was placed in me, and I intend to honor it responsibly. The judge nodded. He looked back at my parents. Without substantial evidence, the court cannot grant control of the inheritance. The claims against your daughter lack merit. A quiet wave of relief washed over me, but I didn't celebrate. I simply exhaled, feeling the weight lift slowly off my shoulders. The tension between us hadn't disappeared. The wounds were still there, but the truth had finally been acknowledged. As I walked out of the courthouse that day, I realized something profound. Sometimes the universe doesn't give you closure immediately. Sometimes it gives you patience, persistence, and the quiet reassurance that truth will prevail. I smiled softly to myself. Maybe, just maybe, this was the first step towards something like peace. After the court hearing, life slowly began to feel normal again. Not perfect, not untouched by the hurt, but normal enough to breathe without the constant weight pressing on my chest. I spent the next few days quietly reflecting, sitting at my kitchen table with my morning coffee, looking out at the soft sunlight filtering through the blinds. I thought about my parents a lot, about their love, their mistakes, and their fear. I realized that their actions, while painful, came from a place of confusion and perhaps even misplaced concern. That didn't excuse what they did, but understanding it helped me let go of the anger I had been holding on to. I also thought about Captain Pierce, the mentor who had trusted me completely. Her faith in me had been unwavering, even when those closest to me had doubted. It was her belief in my character that had guided me through the court battles, the mediation that failed, and the long nights of self-doubt. I felt a deep sense of gratitude. It reminded me that sometimes the people who choose to believe in us can shape our lives in ways no one else can. When I finally called my parents a week later, the conversation was quiet but honest. "Mom, Dad," I began softly, "I know this hasn't been easy, and I know we've all made mistakes." My mother's voice wavered. "We never meant to hurt you. We were scared, and we acted foolishly." My father stayed silent for a moment, then said, "You've always been strong. Maybe stronger than we realized." I felt a lump in my throat, but instead of pain, it was relief. I'm not angry anymore. I just want us to find a way to be a family again. We didn't solve everything that day. There were still unspoken words, lingering mistrust, and careful steps to rebuild, but it was a start. And sometimes a start is enough. Over the following weeks, I focused on honoring the responsibility I had been entrusted with. I made careful decisions, not for wealth or recognition, but to uphold the values that Captain Pierce had instilled in me. Every time I wrote a letter, helped someone in need, or reviewed a case, I remembered that trust is sacred and must be handled with care. Looking back, I realized this experience had taught me more than I could have imagined. It wasn't just about inheritance, money, or even legal battles. It was about integrity, resilience, and the quiet strength it takes to face betrayal without letting it break you. It was about patience, understanding, and the power of truth. And finally, it was about hope. Hope that even in the most painful moments, we can find clarity, closure, and a way forward. Sometimes life doesn't give us immediate answers, but if we stay calm, stay true, and honor what we believe in, the universe has a way of setting things right. If you enjoyed this emotional journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel to follow more real-life stories like this one.